I knew that one day I would return to the long road. It was an urge that I couldn't resist. The vast open space, the freedom for the soul to move, the darkness. My destination was Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and I would like to share with you my journey on foot to the heart of Islam. It's the first day of my walk. Today I walked 5 kilometers from Ruwais. It took me about 45 minutes to reach this point. It's going to take us about 2 days to reach the border from this point to the Saudi Arabian border. The road leading up to the UAE-Saudi border was vast, dark, derelict. At the same time, there was a feeling that this place was being preserved, watched over. There were no living souls nearby, just the roar of machines in transit. At night, the darkness engulfed everything. Light was scarce. There was no life here, and I was aware that I was the only one on foot. I learned in this darkness that in order for humanity to emerge and advance out of its blindness, we sometimes have to travel through difficulty in order to grasp our given outlook, which we sometimes openly contradict. My people, the Bedouins who traveled the endless sands in the past, were the best examples of humanity and humbleness, traits and lessons that are disappearing from the synthetic fabric of our modern society. In the static and barren land that surrounded me, I was reminded that life still prospered in the harsh conditions. As I approached the UAE-Saudi border, the trucks that had driven past me during the days leading up to my arrival here had come to a standstill. They would stay static for days. I felt triumphed over these machines that had previously roared past me so easily as I began my transition from the UAE to Saudi Arabia. Upon entering the kingdom, my body had changed its reaction to the environment I was moving through. There is a different feeling when traveling on foot, especially when crossing through conditions which are shifting around you. My first steps continued to immerse my body into what would be one of the most difficult tasks, crossing the Harth highway. My soul began to bond with the tarmac, in a similar way to that of my previous journey into the empty quarter. The landscape was arid and dead. Reminders of life were in the form of scraps and animals that left their skeletons behind for us to ponder over. Driving through this derelict land was tough, let alone walking. In this difficult place, where a thin strip of tarmac cutting through Arabia was the only path to the heart of it all. Even the machines dreaded the journey through Harth, towards Kharj and Hafuf. At some point I stumbled across modern-day Bedouins, merging the old ways with the new. Machines and the lifeline of the past stood side by side. It was a testimony that we must not let our culture and tradition fade away, but rather supplement it with modern-day inventions. Stations were sparse on this road. They were simple and very basic. I met some interesting people at these stations, mostly truckers, delivering goods, trying to reach their destinations. This was a lonely path. There were no people and nothing existed, except an empty strip of tarmac, baking in the middle of the desert. The days were hot, difficult. There was no access to running water. I had to use a water bottle and whatever was left of the water supply in order to perform ablution. At the gas stations and sparse settlements, I would find people who lived on this harsh road. They had their views on my attempt to reach Mecca by foot from the UAE.
طبعا المنطقة هذه هي من أطراف الربوع الخالي. توجد فيها بعض الصعوبات بالنسبة للإنسان الراجل اللي يمشي مشي. منها أوقات حركات الهواء لما يهب الريح، الرمال هنا متحركة والجو حار خاصة بالصيف. بالطريق في بعض الصعوبات، الطريق شوية فيها طلوع ونزول ليست مستوية تماما.
Some machines never made it. This was a common sight. They became remnants of what they once were, wasting away in the desert. If you were man or machine, this highway could break you. At one point I was awakened from my sleep. In the pitch-black night I saw a roaring nova, burning in the darkness. Was the world ending, I thought? I later learned that this was the great train of Kharj. It starts its journey at midnight and ends after Fajr prayer. It was a menacing sight that made the big trucks on the road seem irrelevant. Moving down the long road, I would see the landscape changing. My rhythm was often affected by the shifting terrain. The weather had a habit of changing randomly throughout the day. I had packed a lot of medium-weight clothing, anticipating a cold journey throughout the mission. This was an error on my part, as it was uncomfortably hot during the day, contrasting the temperature at dusk, which would drop to 14 degrees Celsius and sometimes even as low as 12 in a matter of minutes. After 19 days of walking, I've reached a town called Kharj, which is 80 kilometers away from Riyadh. I'm feeling a bit tired physically, but mentally I'm still strong. I still believe and I still know that I can make it all the way to Mecca, inshallah. As you can see, there's green vegetation around me. It's a big change from where I was in the beginning, near the border. Flashes of greenery reminded me that life can flourish in harsh conditions. It is said that the weakest of Allah's creations have the secrets to life. I believe this was present here. As I reached the industrial outskirts of Riyadh, the desert highway merged with the concrete sidewalks and steel factories. Civilization began to surround me again. After days of solitude, I was joined by two Saudis who had heard of my journey in the local news. They said they had anticipated my arrival and expressed their desire to join me on the long road for a day or two. I listened for a change to the aspirations and dreams that they had for their country. How they felt a similar feeling of liberation when they left their lives to come and join me. They asked why I had left everything behind to travel in such a traditional way. My answer was simple. In order to satisfy the soul's desire, we must journey through what the heart dreads the most, loneliness. We have to answer destiny when it calls, and my answer is to walk. Entering Riyadh, I was engulfed by the roar of modern life. This city is well known for being busy. These roads were only meant to be used by vehicles. It was a concrete maze of moving machines. Roads that cut through each other so aggressively, I had to contemplate every step. Walking through the city was difficult and time-consuming. It required a lot of maneuvering, planning my route around bridges and interchanges. A single wrong step could have been fatal. I was relieved to leave the busy city behind as I made my way through the mountain region, away from Riyadh. Today is the 23rd day of the journey. We spent 1.5 days in Riyadh before reaching here in the mountainous region. As you can see, it's going to get a little bit more difficult as I try to cross on this road through to Mecca, because it's very rocky and very arid. I met some animal friends while on my journey. I paused to share some of my rations with them. As I crossed through the mountains, I witnessed elements of a bygone era, history still intact, a place that wasn't destroyed to make way for the new development. An ancient feeling still lingered in the air. This road I travelled on was no stranger to accidents, and this was the usual sight I had to endure as I moved through the days and nights. It was challenging to move through the darkness, with vehicles speeding unpredictably around me, but it was not the machines that were about to bring my journey to an end. As night approached, I was stopped by a police officer. He asked what I was doing on this dangerous road. I explained to him that I was a journeyman from the UAE, and that I had walked from our capital to this current point. He was not pleased, and radioed for backup. I pleaded with the officer to release me, as I had entered the country legally, and that all GCC nationals have the freedom of movement. He refused. I was sent back to Riyadh, where I had just walked from. The agonizing aspect of the setback was that it was totally out of my control. In Riyadh city, I managed to enter the ruler's court, with mediation from the UAE embassy. I met the deputy ruler of Riyadh. He ordered all police and paramilitary units not to stop me on my quest to reach Mecca on foot. I am forever grateful for his support during the mission. A day later I received a message from the Vice President of the UAE supporting my journey to Mecca. I was humbled by his support. After endless nights in the dark, where visibility was poor, where cold salty water was the only form of nourishment, I was finally getting closer to Mecca. The journey started to get difficult here. Settlements were further apart, sparsely populated. Trucks became less frequent. Mountain ranges twisted along the concrete road and broke down all forms of life. In the darkness, I often found my soul had acquainted itself with solitude, as if it was at peace in this vast, barren region. The endless road had a way of bringing reflection back to my soul and giving me the strength I needed to reach the house of Allah. Often I would contemplate the meaning of existence and what we, as humans, do to make sure we follow our destinies. I would think of current world affairs and the need to bring compassion into our hearts once again. Reaching Sayd al-Kabir was a turning point on my journey to reach Mecca. I had taken many steps from the UAE to this point, where I would transform, literally, as this was a point of miqat. Here I would abandon all stitched clothing and prepare for Umrah. I washed in the masjid and prepared my ihram to be worn. I had to wear 2 layers as it was very cold at night. From this point I would only sleep for 2 or 3 hours a day. My food was reduced as my body began to enter a transition where nothing else really mattered. My focus was reaching Mecca. It was challenging to walk without any gear or protective clothing. The jackets and pants that had served me so well were gone now. Since headwear is stitched, it was also not allowed to be worn. Walking was hard as the sun beat down on me. The road signs taunted me as I drew close to my final destination. 1 kilometer felt like 10. The road seemed to stretch on forever as I anticipated reaching Mecca. I contemplated all the people who had travelled from distant lands in the past just to perform Umrah and Hajj. How hard it must have been to survive, to reach Mecca safely. I could not blame the people who said that I would not make it, but I am sad that they had forgotten where we came from as a people. I met other travellers on this road. For ages they had travelled long distances with little food and water. I noticed these miracles and thought that if we only sat down for a few minutes every day to appreciate what the Almighty has bestowed on us, our lives on this earth would not be so inhumane. My feet passed over remnants of social conflicts, reminders of how lost we can become. Signboards on the road were all that I read for 50 days. The most prominent in my mind are the signboards that led up to Mecca. I remembered the early days, at the beginning of my journey, in Harth. It had been a long way from that difficult road to this final path that led up to Mecca.
I knew I had to reach this point, and that even if I fall down and I can't use my legs anymore, I have to crawl to reach Mecca. Mentally, from day one to the last day, I was not going to stop. But physically, the body is a very fragile machine. It can only move if you have a strong will and strong mindset. And I think that's what got me through, with a lot of faith. Alhamdulillah.